person that's opened the.
What? You got 2 seconds.
Really?
Is that the whole lot?
Ours are up.
IT stuff.
Yeah, but they're it's just the broadcast view right now, right? So I'm trying the staff computer's not doing anything.
What is affordable? Really?
We're in a technological delay. Best optimistic guess is 5 minutes.
5 to 10,
So if it's a full professor, we wait 10 and then leave.
and then we get to leave class with.
All right,
Get to leave class.
I'm hoping for we leave.
I forgot something. I forgot something in my truck. I'll be right back.
Paint me a picture.
Tons of real estate junk. Really? Yes.
We can get through this with descriptions and imagery.
So
I had to,
I mean, honest to God,
that's the blessing of,
recall.
I was working on my full room tonight.
Hey, do you want to sell this? Sure, it's a double lot. I'll pay $35,000 for it.
I like this one.
And you start to tell them that there's
I've heard that guy's
utility lien, a demolition lien, and a code enforcement lien on it. And they're like, all right, I'm not that
That might be
interested.
him. I'm just guessing, but I think so.
But we've,
I haven't really.
we've got so many of them, we just have to get rid of them.
Yeah.
We should at least. We need to get them.
Down the street from me, it's 3/4 acre lots, and they're building 3 identical spec houses.
Article on the.
And the lots themselves, I think the 3 lots were
The one they tore down?
1.3 million.
that's a county project, not.
They were like 375.
What are they going to do with it? I thought they had to tear it down or.
They did.
They tore most of it down. I don't think.
Nope, we don't have anything
So they have some of it.
as far as the definition in
Kind of the village.
as far as
Yeah.
affordable.
We had a committee for
Be a great place to get married.
Yes.
Yeah, the covering.
I mean, we don't have anything in our code. I don't know if our comp
Course, it
plan
might change
defines it.
Bars.
And there's different
Oh, but now they want to come up
different categories. You have the very low income, and moderate. But that's for our SHIP program.
On the affordable
So
housing.
that doesn't, are you talking about workforce housing or what kind of housing are you talking?
Oh, we don't get to use the
okay.
algorithm anymore? We
He
need to
stepped off
regulate
it.
it.
nurses.
I gotta find someone to do the taxpayers.
Can't have anybody tell me the truth. I mean,
I
lying.
gotta find somebody to do the taxpayers.
Getting teacher makes 50
Amazing.
Oh, is it?
To do with it.
for 180 days.
I mean, like, as in the presidency of the taxpayers. If there was one thing I could just.
Anything like that.
That's the
Stunning.
problem.
County did do
I
a
know
great
people
job.
that do that, but
County. They did
There's that too.
Roseland Community Center, which was about to fall.
Right.
Huh?
Bastion.
I went to college and 2 teachers,
That on.
2 teachers are making 100.
And that's
And we did a ribbon cutting. They just did a fabulous job. Really good job.
I didn't have much time, and I knew, when
Maybe
I
not, well, the rates
there
are up.
were
Yeah.
officers,
It's a neat
stepped
area.
off, just like
Saw that,
Still old Florida.
for a couple of years, and I'm like,
different subject, but
Although I was shocked.
Milo Thornton, $10,000 cut in pay, and he's down to 128.
Much higher.
there's, Taylor Dingle has some promise. Very, very fun.
Number 3 guy.
Because a lot of our members are.
It's too, because, I mean, I live out near Point West.
He wants to get elected office of something, So if he did it, it would be a minimal. It would be for a minimal period until he ran for something.
Yeah, I know.
So he can't run for something.
Daryl Lohr's
I don't know if
son's
they're more
wedding.
afraid of what they're doing.
Good enough to go ahead and get started.
Good to go?
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the delayed April 28th, 2022 meeting of the Indian River County Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions, deletions to the agenda?
No, sir.
No, no additions. And there are no meetings to, no minutes to approve. So we have 4 agenda items tonight. 2 of them are items that are not on consent, that are quasi-judicial. 2 of them are public hearings. Are you happy with the order? We're happy with the order. Okay, we'll begin with agenda item number 1. It is a racetrack number 1422 Vero Beach, and it is a request for a major site plan approval to construct a new 8,100 square foot convenience store with 16 automotive fueling positions, 6 tractor trailer fueling positions, and associated site improvements. Racetrack Petroleum Incorporated is the owner. Tanaha Design Incorporated is the agent. This is located on the northeast corner of State Road 60 and 90th Avenue. The zoning is CG, General Commercial. Land use designation is CI, Commercial Industrial. Any declaration of ex parte communications? None. Swear-in participants, anyone who wishes to speak on this, please be sworn in. This and the next quasi-judicial item as well.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Staff, let's see the presentation.
Let's hope.
Yes. And we've seen this screen before.
Okay, if that's not gonna, let's try one other thing here. Oh, okay, there we go. I'm sorry. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, apologize for the technical difficulties. We'll do our best to try to pick up the pace and still get us out somewhat on time. Tonight, we have the first request is the Racetrack Vero Beach Major Site Plan request. The project site is located at the northeast corner of State Road 60 and 90th Avenue. It is zone CG, General Commercial. Here's an aerial depicting the existing conditions of the site. And of course, the racetrack site, if you will, is in blue. The existing Duffy's Mobile is in the lower southwest corner of the overall project site. That existing convenience store is currently vacant and will be demolished prior to site construction on the new project. The project site plan shown here includes the 8,100 square foot convenience store in the middle of the racetrack site. The automotive fueling to the south of the convenience store, between the convenience store and State Road 60. The automotive parking in proximity to the convenience store. The tractor trailer fueling north of the store, and then there are some tractor trailer spaces along the east side of the site. The project's circulation plan includes 2 right-in, right-out driveway connections to State Road 60, and those are both served by westbound right turn lanes, new turn lanes, as well as 2 full driveway connections to 90th Avenue, and those are also served by northbound right turn lanes. And there are also some intersection improvements outlined in the staff report, including a new southbound designated right turn lane, a new through lane, southbound through lane, and then a dedicated left. And then on the opposite side of the intersection, they have to do some restriping. They're going to convert from a left through right to a dual left scenario. So it's not really adding lanes, but it's restriping and reconfiguring, and also the signalizing provides a protected left at that intersection now. The stormwater plan includes a off-site stormwater pond that will serve the project site, but will also serve the remainder of the larger roughly 20-acre site, and is sized to generally handle the overall site. It may be expanded depending on how the larger site is developed ultimately. And also, at the traffic circulation plan, the easternmost and northernmost driveways are shared driveways that stub and will ultimately serve shared access to the larger part of the site. The environmental/landscape plan includes the native upland set-aside area. They are doing a combination of on-site native upland set-aside through a conservation area, as well as some additional fee in lieu. They weren't able to accommodate it all on-site. They're also going to be doing tree mitigation, again, planting as well as fee in lieu. And then your typical landscape requirements, including interior landscaping, exclusive driveway, lake shoreline, littoral zone, and foundation landscaping. And of course, the State Road 60 and 90th Avenue buffers. There is a required 90th Avenue right-of-way dedication, a small area, basically to accommodate that new northbound right turn lane. I mentioned the off-site traffic improvements as required improvements. The external sidewalks includes a new sidewalk on 90th Avenue, as well as reconfiguring a portion of the existing State Road 60 sidewalk to accommodate the westbound right turn lanes, and internal sidewalks/pedestrian connections back to those external sidewalk requirements. And with that, staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant major site plan approval with conditions stated in the staff report related to the upland set-aside fee in lieu, the upland set-aside conservation easement, tree mitigation fee in lieu, the master real estate agreement. I failed to mention that's for the shared stormwater pond and the shared driveway connections, the 90th Avenue right-of-way dedication, the off-site traffic improvements, and the required landscape buffer improvements and tree mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. P&Z questions for staff? No questions? In that case, we'll open up the floor to anyone who would like to comment on this from the floor. State your name and address, please.
Brian Potts, 10th Design, 2494 Rose Spring Drive, Orlando. Just wanted to say we appreciate working with staff. We agree with everything we heard, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Apparently, go ahead.
I'm Alan Bell. I'm with the racetrack, and I'm also agree that with all of staff's recommendations. Appreciate all the hard work that's been put into it, and just here for questions.
Is this on the same scale as the one on in Fellsmere, or is this much bigger?
So this is our larger prototype that can cater to truck traffic. So the 8100.
That one doesn't have trucks, right?
Right. So it's probably a 5,500 square foot. So the 8,100 square feet. And there's a section of it, larger bathrooms and things to cater to the professional drivers.
Thank you. So it's more of a truck stop, kind of a.
It's
truck.
it's probably a hybrid is the best way I would
Yeah.
describe it.
Yeah, because we don't have showers. We don't have a sit down restaurant. That type stuff. It's we do have a great food offer, but it's not like a sit down restaurant. It's more have the high flow diesel pumps out back so that it can cater to 18-wheelers, but also just larger vehicles in general that would congest the front court so that they're able to go to the back, fill up, and get out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, call for a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. The second item, non-consent item, quasi-judicial, is Harbor Bluffs PD Phase 2. And this is a request for preliminary PD plan, plat approval for a 142-unit, single-family residential development to be known as Harbor Bluffs PD Phase 2. Pulte Home Company LLC is the owner. Kohler and Hearing LLC is the agent. This is located on the west side of the future County Road 11, 11th Drive, south of 41st Street. The zoning is PD, planned development. The land use designation is CI, commercial industrial. Any declaration of ex parte communications regarding this? None, and participants have been sworn in, so staff, presentation, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and for the record, I'm Ryan Sweeney, Chief of Current Development. I failed to introduce myself the first time around. Tonight is the request for Harbor Bluffs PD Phase 2 Preliminary PD Plan Plat. Most of you are probably familiar with the Harbor Bluffs overall PD, which a lot of you saw from inception at the overall PD, and then as well as Phase 1, which is often referred to as Saxon Harbor Bluffs Phase 1, is the multifamily portion west of 11th Drive. So this is Phase 2. Pulte Homes is the applicant, a single-family product. This is on the west side of, the multifamily is on the east side. This is on the west side of 11th Drive, roughly the northern two-thirds of the 11th Drive frontage. A bit about the PD process. So again, back in, I believe it was December of 2020, was when the board approved the PD rezoning and conceptual PD plan, and that was a public hearing in front of you all, and then ultimately approved by the board. And then tonight's request is for the preliminary PD plan plat approval. After that is the land development permit, which is reviewed and approved at the staff level, primarily through the Public Works Department. And then the final step is a final PD plan plat, which in this case they would be platting the actual lots. So again, the project site is located, and I realize now you can't see my cursor, but again, due to technical difficulties. So the subject site is the roughly northern two-thirds of the 11th Drive frontage on the west side of 11th Drive, south of 41st Street, and is shown here in gray. An aerial depicting the existing and surrounding conditions of the site and how it fits in to the overall area with, again, 41st Street to the north, Indian River, 11th Drive to the immediate east, but Indian River Boulevard further to the east, and US 1 to the west. So the preliminary PD plan does propose a total of 142 single-family homes. The overall PD approval allows for single-family, duplex or paired villa product, and then multifamily. So this phase is entirely single-family. I did mention even within the phase there's a sub-phasing plan, 2A and 2B. So generally the north half of the project is phase 2A. The south half is 2B. Depending on market demand, they may ultimately decide to build both phases at once, but it's oftentimes easier to phase more and do that in advance, and you can always build more at one time, but they do have that option. The project's traffic circulation plan includes a full driveway connection to 11th Drive, which again is a future county road, which is ultimately being provided by the overall Harbor Bluffs project. It is a gated driveway connection. There's also, and that connection will be served by a northbound left turn lane on the new road. The opposing southbound, I'm sorry, we'll get into that later. The secondary stabilized access, which is the fire access, is a connection to 11th Drive. And then in the future, if you see down at the bottom of the screen, there's also a future interconnection to phases 3 and 4. I mentioned in the staff report that Pulte is also working currently actively in the technical review committee process and development review process for phases 3 and 4, and that will ultimately interconnect and provide a second connection to 11th Drive. The project stormwater plan includes 2 quote-unquote on-site stormwater lakes within the project, and then a larger third lake, which you see at the southeast corner of the overall project. That's technically located in phases 3 and 4, but will be utilized in an intermittent basis for the stormwater intake for 11th Drive, but then will ultimately also serve phases 3 and 4. The landscape plan includes a perimeter PD buffer around the entire perimeter. Along the south there, assuming Pulte moves forward with phases 3 and 4, and it's essentially a like-for-like project, that buffer will be done away with because there's no need to buffer between phases with internal to the project. We have it there on an interim basis just in case phases 3 and 4 don't move forward. The dedications, improvements, and conditions of this project, again, the 11th Drive improvements, which I didn't go into much detail. I did in the staff report. Primarily, those are outlined per a developer's agreement and per the overall project, but from a timing perspective, if for some reason Pulte were to move forward in advance of Saxon, they, along with the underlying developer, would be on the hook for providing those improvements prior to their project receiving a certificate of completion. The right-of-way dedication, there's a small corner, again, without the cursor, it's tough, but there's a small section in the southwest corner of this project that fronts on 17th Avenue and 39th Street, part of the old W.E. Jeffries subdivision from the 19-teens that only had 25 feet of right-of-way, and it's normally 50 feet throughout that subdivision, so they do have to dedicate a small additional portion of right-of-way. And again, if this phase gets platted in advance of Saxon, those right-of-way dedications will occur whichever first phase occurs. I mentioned the perimeter PD buffers. There are internal sidewalks / pedestrian system throughout the project on both sides of the road, street lighting throughout the subdivision, and green space recreation requirements, which again, without the cursor, it's tough, but there is, you can probably just make out kind of right at the entrance there in front of the northern lake, there's a green area that will be a active amenity center, and then there's also some smaller passive recreation areas in the southern portion of the project. And with that, staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the preliminary PD plan plat for Harbor Bluffs PD Phase 2 with conditions listed in staff's report. Again, the 11th Drive improvements, including sidewalks, turn lanes, and drainage, final landscape, street lighting, and tree mitigation plans at LDP, installation of the landscape and street lighting improvements, and the right-of-way dedication for 17th Ave and 39th Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Commissioner questions for staff?
I have one, please.
Yes.
Regarding the exit from 11th on to 41st, how is that going to be handled? Because it obviously is right opposite Lily's K. Is the exit from 11th on to 41st, is that strictly a right turn only, or?
It's a left and a right. And there's, well, I guess, I'm not sure if it's technically they have to be able to do a through if someone were to go into Lily's K, but I'm pretty sure it's a left through and a dedicated right, or conversely, it's a dedicated left and a right through, but it is a dual on 41st.
And is there intentions that some point in time that would be a signaled?
I don't think it meets the signalization separation requirements. I also, even at the overall level where we are at, I think it was 624 total units, which this phase reduces, it did not trip the signal analysis.
Well, I'm just thinking down the road where it is connected to 37th Street, and part of the 11th was supposed to be to alleviate some of that traffic.
Yeah, I think we'll revisit that. I do anticipate the intersection at 37th and 11th Drive to be signalized, but I don't anticipate at this time that the 41st Street intersection would be signalized. But again, that's subject to, traffic studies and future build out of surrounding area.
You good? Any other questions? Yeah.
I have one more out of interest than anything else, but is it unusual that Phase 2 approval comes before Phase 1 begins construction, or we got two different, is Phase 1 not Pulte?
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mutcher. Yeah, Phase 1 is Saxon. That's a multifamily developer. They have essentially all of their approvals in place, but I think this is either going to become a one or the other, or maybe perhaps more of a joint effort to all pull together and build all at once in terms of the 11th Drive improvements.
But there's no limitations.
Well, the road has to be built one way or another. So yeah, as long as the improvements get built, in theory, Phase 2 could go in advance of Phase 1. But yes, it's a different developer, a different group that will nonetheless have to work together.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ryan, you mentioned earlier, if I recall correctly, this project was originally approved for 624 units.
Correct.
And then, if I'm recalling correctly, this is the project that came in and wanted to be revised, I think, to have some single-family housing, and that number was then going to drop down.
So let me go even further into the history of Harbor Bluffs. So Harbor Bluffs was actually originally approved as a site plan, a multifamily project that did not include single-family or duplex. Neither of those were allowed. Three units or more. That was approved as a conceptual site plan and administrative permit use, which was allowed in the Med District. That was at 624 units. They came back in as a PD to allow single-family and duplex paired villa product. The number then was still 624. at the conceptual level. When phase one came in at Saxon, their allotted units was 285. They were still there. This is the first actual reduction. They're going, I believe I threw the number in there. Yeah, in this phase alone, they go from 228 down to 142. And, at the risk, Bill, I don't know. The phases 3 and 4, I don't want to give you the exact numbers, but they will be further reducing in those phases as well, assuming they move forward with that. So this was our expected outcome.
So the last hearing we had on this was not a reduction from 624 down to something in the 400s?
Correct. It was 624 to 624, but with an understanding that if they did exercise the single-family option, that they would inherently go down.
Okay, but we don't know to what number they expect to end up in the end. How many units will there be in this project in the end? Do we know that answer yet?
We don't, but we'll know soon. And it's considerably less, to the order of 200 units.
The, from 11th Drive to 37th Avenue, who builds that, the developer or?
The county. There's a section where the project ends, where the county has already purchased, I don't know if you guys were familiar with what used to be called the surgery center. The county's purchased it, demoed, and our plans are, believe it or not, folks knock the county for moving slow. We're on pace or even ahead of their leg to build.
Okay. And then, as I understand it, our hope is that most of the traffic won't empty onto 37th Avenue as such. It will go through 37th Avenue and then continue on 11th Drive, is it? Out to US 1 eventually?
That, and I'm glad Phil's here, because he'll be happy to tell you about that part of the.
Bill Mattson, Community Development Director. Yes, that's exactly right. We are in the process of obtaining the right-of-way needed for the south piece. So the north piece is a little ahead of the south piece, but south piece is moving along pretty well too. And US 1 will be doing I'll just throw it out there, Aviation Boulevard US 1 intersection study will be conducted by FDOT. That'll be looking at, among the other alternatives, a flyover. So the flyover will start somewhere pretty close to where this building is, come down somewhere over by the furniture store, the Beatty Properties, and right behind where the source is and the homeless center. And then the at-grade roadway will weave itself up to 11th Drive. So combine the north piece of 11th Drive, the south piece of 11th Drive, and the flyover should really eliminate and hold off our 37th Street traffic problems for the indefinite future. So,
If you were giving us your best estimate, Phil, as to when that extension, again, of, I guess, 11th Drive out toward Aviation Boulevard?
north piece 2 years, south piece probably 4 years, and then the flyover probably going to be about 10 years. So they will build the intersection improvements first to get the full-blown Aviation Boulevard extension project going, with the flyover to be retrofit onto it later.
And getting back to that earlier question about the number of units, I noticed these two phases combined to 427 units, and we've got 2 more phases to go. Does that give you any, knowing what you know, and I see that staff is reviewing apparently some plans on phases 3 and 4, does that give us any idea approximately what number we're going to end up with?
Bill, I'm reluctant to say the number because they're subject to change, but I do know what the number is for phases 3 and 4, so I'll leave it up to you. Yes?
Do you think we'll end up in the 400s, or 500s, or 600s?
Right, probably right, close to 500.
Okay. Okay. And I got one other question. This is a stupid question I should have asked a long time ago, because we see it in every single application that's made. Open space. I know we talk about, there's green space in here that's required 7.5%. I assume green space is included within open space.
Opposite. So the 7.5% is common area green/recreation space. Think of that as actual areas where you can recreate, and that ironically is not necessarily truly pervious open space, because you can have a clubhouse or a pool, courts, what have you. That's the recreation space. You're also allowed to count certain things like the littoral zones, upland set-asides, or wetlands. But open space is just your pervious green space, if you will, and that's a much higher magnitude. For this particular project, it's
30% on that.
42 for this PD. 30 is the minimum for CG zoning, but through the PD process, it's 42%. And then they do meet that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
One other question regarding the timing of 11th Drive. Is it going to be required to be simultaneous, the county and the developer, or one before the other?
That's a good question. So ideally, it will be simultaneous, or the county would be first, so we're not the one holding them up. But there is, I don't know if you all recall, there is, and Chip, you might have been gone for a little while. There's a little jog over to connect to what is, I think it's 12th Court in an interim capacity, if necessary, but I don't anticipate that being needed.
Okay.
Everybody good? Open the floor for public comment. Anyone who'd like to comment on this project?
It's a public hearing, just, oh, no, I'm sorry, you're right, you're right, I'm sorry, I'm thinking ahead.
We still have 2 of those to go.
Yes, we do. And yeah, here we go. So you should be able to just advance it that way.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, staff, Chair of the Commission, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Dan Sorrow with the land planning firm of Kotler and Herring. I have been sworn in. Ryan, thank you for the presentation this evening. I really don't have too much to add to it, but did want to just highlight a couple things. Here in the chambers with me this evening is Mr. Garrett Dinsmore with the Pulte Group, the developer, and also the utility and drainage engineer with Kimley Horn, Mr. Jacob Lawson, should you have any technical questions for them. This is Pulte's, I think, 4th development in Indian River County. They do everything first class, from their amenity centers to the products that they offer the new residents, to the passive trails. Everything in their community is really, really well done. The Devasta brand that Pulte has been around here in Indian River County and in the Treasure Coast for many, many years. This highlights 3 of the current development applications currently in Indian River County. I was here last Thursday before many of you folks at the Waterway Village Planning and Zoning Board meeting, the very last phase of Waterway Village, and we had 1,596 units approved within that development. Tonight's subject application is Harbor Bluffs. We've also developed Providence Place, and one that's not on here is Harbor Isles, and that has a total of 271 single-family developed units. And as you can see, Pulte is, a long-term business here in the county that provides quality housing for many, many different residents. One of the things that they do very well is, if you've been to Waterway Village, they have a very state-of-the-art clubhouse facility, pickleball courts, resort-style pool, tennis courts. All of their communities have an amenity center. Harbor Bluffs is going to be no different, but very, very well done. I think Ryan did a great job highlighting the site and where it's located. Most of the residents who are going to be moving to this community are going to take the main north-south arterial corridors of Old Dixie Highway and Indian River Boulevard. This site is located right in the middle of both of those two corridors off of 41st Street, and as he mentioned, 11th Drive is being extended. We are directly across the street from Lily's Cay, Cleveland Clinic to the south, and the Vero Beach Country Club, to give you a little bit of a better picture of where this site lies within the county. The property is 42.67 acres. The land use is commercial and industrial. It's the area designated in the county for high intensity. So, the commercial, the industrial uses are a higher intensity. Back in 2020, Commissioner, you were asking about the original approvals, and at that time we submitted 2 master plans, one that kept the overall units, and then one that allowed us to go to a PD. PDs weren't currently allowed within the med zoning district. That's why we had to ask for the single-family homes. We got that approval in 2020, and it's a significant reduction in density and number of units. We went from an 8-unit per acre density down to a 3.3 unit acre per density. So we're taking a lot of trips off the road, a lot of less impact to the county, and with this proposal, we're only proposing 142 units of single-family homes. So very, very significant from the original 624 units. When I was here last week, we had talked about why so many people are going to a PD development. I think it was mentioned that 70% of the new projects that you review are going to PDs instead of straight zoning. And I think it's simple. I think it's because of the lot sizes that are required for the regular straight zoning. If it wasn't a PD, you'd have to have a 70-foot lot size, 70-foot wide lot, with a minimum of 100 feet deep in the single-family section. If you're in the multifamily section, it's really no different. You have to have a 70-foot lot. So if you're going to do a fee simple townhome, you have to go to a PD development. And some of the advantages of PDs, instead of putting that open space on each individual lot with its own drainage, you create open spaces within the buffers. You create a master stormwater system, lake systems to capture all of the runoff from all of the homes and all of the right-of-ways. You have a centralized water and sewer system, and there's a lot of benefits that the county gets when you go to a PD system, because instead of allocating these uses on each single-family lot, you put them into the community, you put them along the buffers, along 41st Street, along 11th Drive, and along some of these other type areas. This is the master plan and site and rendering that my office prepared for Pulte that we sent in, and you can kind of see as it was highlighted, the primary gated access off of 11th Drive is shown in yellow. The secondary non-gated access, which is going to connect to what we're calling phase 3 and 4, which is the villas, is shown there. And then the recreational space, the 7.5% recreational space is not only the amenity center, but also we've got the open spaces with some active recreation, walking trails and other uses located within the lots. So you can kind of see on this drawing that each of these lots are amenitized either on a lakefront or a buffer, no back-to-back lots. Everyone has their own individual backyard. The lot distribution for this particular project, we've got a variety of 3 different product types that we're offering. Out of the 142 single-family lots, we have a 65-foot lot, a 50-foot lot, and a 40-foot lot. So the 40s will have a 30-foot chassis product, the 50s will have a 40-foot chassis product, and then the 65s will have a 55. We couldn't build this lot if it was under the straight Indian River County zoning. So that's why PDs, I think, are preferred, because most people spend their time inside their house. People don't want the big lots anymore to maintain, and they prefer kind of the smaller footprint, but the same size house. This here shows the site on the aerial, and you can see the 11th Drive that connects down to the street, which is the extension which Mr. Sweeney mentioned that the county is currently working on. We hope that we can get through the land development permit quickly and help the county with 11th Drive move forward so we can get under construction. And this does show both the phase that we're discussing this evening, up top highlighted in yellow with the 142 units, and I can confirm that the second phase is going to have 60 units. So 60 plus 42, 200, and 2 total lots, which is a significant reduction from what the original approval had. We are in for TRC right now on this plan. You can see that it will be connected to phase 2. Phase 3 has its own access off of 11th Drive, which will also be gated. and we're going through the technical requirements of that site plan and that PD process right now. So that we're hoping to bring that PD before you within the next few months. And just to talk a little bit about economic development and for the county, you know, we're anticipating that each of these will be right around 2,500 square feet. When you look at impact fees that are the developer pays at time of building permit, right over $1.5 million, and then also the ad valorem taxes that are going to be generated on an annual reoccurring basis for the county brings it right around $852,000 for the year. So significant investment that the developer is making, but also the benefit to the county as well. And just in closing, you know, we're offering a variety of different residential products for this type of development. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, with the land development code. The technical review committee recommended approval, and we ask for your favorable vote this evening as well. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just have a follow-up on the number. I just want to make sure I understand this. Okay. The entire project, am I correct in understanding that it consists of 4 phases?
Correct.
Okay. Phase 1 had 285.
Correct.
Phase 2, which is this one, has 142. Okay. Phases 3 and 4
Combined is 60.
combined, is that the 60 that you just mentioned?
Correct.
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, and you filed an application on that, which is now being reviewed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So basically, when we're done, we're talking 487 units. Okay. Very good. I'm trying to understand that number. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on this map, you call it phase 3, but that's actually 3 and 4?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then, Ryan, you confused me when you mentioned the surgery center. Is that gonna be torn down for?
It already
extension of the
has
road?
been. What used to be the surgery center, there was a building, that's direct alignment of what will be 11th Drive. So,
Okay.
sorry to confuse you there. Right now, the only roads that are there now is 12th Court, and then there used to be the surgery center, but that would be in the alignment with 11th Drive, which also aligns with Hugh McChrystal, 11th Drive on the south side.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, and on this map, where is phase 1?
You probably don't have a, let me see.
Have the overall.
Let me
No, you wouldn't have a slide, but it,
Yeah, I didn't do it justice. It's, it's this area here. I don't really have, see, on the aerial, it's hard to, okay, so you can kind of see the cleared area that is slightly different. This is the Riverfront Groves property. That's not part of the PD. But if you see sort of this rectangle down here, that's phase 1.
okay, so it's next to 3 and 4. It's east.
Correct,
of 3
yes,
and
it's
4.
immediately east of 3 and 4, correct.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't here then.
Oh, that's right.
We good for questions? Call for motion?
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, 2 public hearings tonight. The first is Indian River County Board of County Commissioners and Kelly Stanton of Supermix request to rezone approximately 9.24 acres from A1 Agricultural 1 District up to 1 unit per 5 units to 5 per 5 acres to IG General Industrial District. Any declaration of ex parte communications? Should we swear in participants for both public hearings at this point? Let's do that. Swear in anyone who wants to speak on either of the 2 public hearings. Please get sworn in.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
And we'll have staff presentation of this first public hearing, please.
Good evening, Planning and Zoning Commission. Chris Balter, Senior Long Range Planner, Community Development. The location and existing land uses, it's located south of and adjacent to 53rd Street and 29th Court. The two subject parcels are up on the screen, highlighted in red. The purpose of this request is to secure the zoning necessary to develop the site with the uses that are allowed under the IG zoning district at a density consistent with the allowed densities of the comprehensive plan. Land use designations, which is CI. Uses under any commercial or industrial zoning districts are subject to the other corridor special development regulations. And the current zoning is A1 zoning. Both parcels are in the urban service area. The A1 district within the urban service area serves as a holding zone until the property owner, based on market conditions, requests a zoning consistent with the property's land use designation. It's a historic zoning that's left over and pretty much waits until the property owner decides what they'd like to do with it. IG zoning district, the general industrial district. The IG general industrial district is intended to provide an area where a broad range of industrial activities may locate and operate without significant inverse impacts on nearby properties. The IG district is further intended to promote the establishment of employment centers that are accessible to the transportation system and other necessary urban service areas. Other corridor special development regulations, we regulate aesthetics, building, landscaping, signs, lighting, and pedestrian connections will be required. The future land use map. This is currently in the 53rd and US 1 commercial node. This zoning, if this zoning gets approved for the rezoning, it would expand the zoning for that to be consistent with industrial. The CI future land use designation, the commercial industrial future land use designation is intended to provide areas for the development of industrial and commercial uses, located in areas with suitable levels of service and infrastructure for urban scale development. It's located along major transportation routes and separated from residential areas. The existing and adjacent zoning. To the north and east are both industrial as well as the south. To the north is the CEMEX concrete plant. To the east is the Titan concrete plant. To the south is the trucking yard for storage of heavy trucks. And the west is A1 vacant land, which was a prior mining operation that no longer exists. The criteria analyzed when doing a rezoning is concurrency, consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistency with the county's land development regulations, environmental impacts, and compatibility with the surrounding uses. Concurrency, we check for sufficient capacity for certain facilities. Transportation, it meets it. Water, wastewater, solid waste, stormwater management. A more detailed review will be done at the time of the project development. The most intense use with the current existing zoning for A1 would be 92,400 square foot of retail agricultural trade. The most intense use with the proposed zoning, general industrial, is 184,800 of general industrial. Consistency with the comprehensive plan. Future land use object 1 promotes a compact and energy efficient land use pattern. Future land use policy 1.17 within the urban service area or near an urban center. Future land use policy 1.18. This request would encourage the development of commercial and industrial areas in commercial/industrial areas. And future land use policy 1.43. For the subject properties, IG is an appropriate given the location criteria for FLU policy 1.43. And this is the specific policy of 1.43. The review criteria is as follows. Along arterial roads and major intersections, yes, it meets that. The subject property abuts 53rd Street to the north, which is an urban principal arterial roadway, and nearby to the east, 53rd Street with US 1 and Old Dixie Highway. Along railroad tracks, yes. Subject property is located within 700 feet of the railroad tracks. Near industrial areas, yes, it meets that. The CEMEX facility to the north and subject properties to the east and south are both zoned IG. Separated from residential development by a major roadway or intervening property, yes, the subject property is over 1/4 of a mile away from Waterway Village, the nearest residential development. And separated from retail and office areas, yes, there are no retail or office areas adjacent to the subject property. Retail uses are east of the railroad and Old Dixie Highway. Consistency with the county land development regulations. Rezoning request is consistent with all applicable sections of the county land development regulations, including section 902.123, standards of review. Environmental impacts. Currently, the property contains vacant land that is vegetated. Rezoning the property is anticipated to have no adverse impacts to the environment. A detailed analysis on the potential environmental impacts resulting from the development will be conducted during the development review process. Conclusion, the request IG is compatible with the surrounding land uses and surrounding uses, consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development regulations, meets the concurrency test, meets the criteria to be rezoned, and no additional environmental impacts. Staff supports the request. The recommendation, staff recommends that PZC recommends to the BCC approve the rezoning request from A1 to IG. Being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Questions from commissioners?
I had a quick one or two. I noticed that it has to be separated from residential, and you said it was a quarter mile from Waterway Village. Is a quarter mile a definition for that qualifies as separated? Because it doesn't seem like very long to me, but it's a drag strip.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, but so that is a quarter mile is the definition for separation?
It's not the definition for separation. However, a quarter of a mile is a far away. It would have to be properties away from it, whether either a property or a roadway buffering the zoning to meet their criteria.
So it could be only one lot?
Yes, correct.
Oh, okay. And let me see, what was my other question? It's gone. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
All right, see if someone can fill the gap for you. Any other questions? No? All right, this is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing for public comment. Any comment on this? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any additional questions? Call for motion?
Move to approve with staff recommendations.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
I remember what I wanted to ask, and that
Doesn't matter now.
I know it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I was just curious,
Yeah.
as I always am. But how did the Board of County Commissioners become a party to this rezoning?
There's a very, very small piece that basically the ownership is the MIA.
Oh,
And
see
so
that.
the board, it's a board yes, the very tiny piece. So the board is doing a board-initiated rezoning of that portion.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, the final public hearing tonight is Bhakta Farms, and it's a request for a major site plan and special exemption use approval for farm-based rum distillery, agricultural industry, with associated residential, accessory residential units. Bhakta Farms LLC is the owner, Mills Short and Associates LLC is the agent. The zoning is A2, agricultural 2, up to 1 unit per 10 acres. Land use designation is AG2, agricultural 2, up to 1 unit per 10 acres. Any ex parte declarations? Participants have been sworn in for this, so staff presentation, please.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. For the record, I am Brandon Christopher Cragen, Senior Planner, Current Development. We are here for Bhakta Farms Distillery, Major Site Plan, and Special Exception Use. The special exception process is a twofold process where it starts out with an extensive staff review where we determine appropriateness and compatibility with the requested use based on the Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan. More specifically, within the Comprehensive Plan, there is a special land use criteria in Section 971.08, subsection 2, that you all have in your staff reports, that staff has analyzed and provided a determination on the land use criteria. It has been determined that this project meets all of the specific land use criteria for that specific section. There is also 2 public hearings, one at the Planning and Zoning Commission that we're having right now, and one at the Board of County Commissioners that will be scheduled at a later date. The Planning and Zoning Commission tonight is charged with recommending to the Board of County Commissioners either an approval request with conditions, or a denial request. The property is located along State Road 60, north of the intersection of State Road 60 and 130th Avenue. This is pretty far out west of Interstate 95. It is also located within the A2 zoning district. The aerial on site shows you the existing conditions around the site. This is a part of a 900-acre farm. The specific limit of this development is approximately 173.9 acres, which represents about 19 to 20% of the overall 900 farm land holding. As you can also see, the site plan is overlaid just to give you an idea of how it'll look like within the existing conditions. On the overall site plan, the distillery and business aspect of the development is located in the central portion of the limits of development, so that 173.9 acre portion of the property. There's residential components on the western edges of the property. You'll see employee housing. There's a pool house, and there's also guest cottages. I'd like to note that the guest cottages are for intermittent use and only for the entertainment of either guests or clients of the distillery business or the Bhakta Farms folks. They will not be used for vacation rentals or any sort of long-term living, except for the employee housing, which they will live in those. The vehicular access to the site is accompanied by 2 existing driveway connections along State Road 60. There's also an emergency access along State Road 60. And then there's also an internal driveway connection that connects both the residential portion and the business portion of the property. So there's no need to go back in and back out via State Road 60. The landscape plan offers 2 State Road 60 landscape buffers. And there's also residential area landscaping that is also planned for the residential area. I'd also like to note that as part of our site plan process, or rather site plan release process, there has to be a species assessment and agency permits that also have to be obtained before we will release the site plan to the applicant. The more detailed version of the landscape plan shows how the landscaping is going to be laid out for the distillery and business operation of the development, and there's also an enlarged view of what the State Road 60 buffers will look like. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the Board of County Commissioners grant major site plan and special exception approval for the proposed Bhakta Farms distillery with conditions stated in the staff report. Those conditions are related to the environmental and jurisdictional agency permits and landscaping. I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner questions?
Yeah, I do, if you don't mind. There's actually quite a bit of residential on this property as far as the cottages, the guest cottages, the employee cottages. So we're not just talking about changing the ag zoning to industrial or for this, but also for residential, and there's several locations. What's the necessity of that?
I'll take this one if you don't mind. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Chip. A couple things. One, first of all, we're not changing the zoning. We're granting a special exception approval for specifically for the agricultural industry or the distillery portion, but as a accessory or related to use is the residential. Now, we kind of thought about that and early on sort of grappled a bit with it. If you think about it, this is still in the A2 zoning, which allows 1 unit per 10 acres, and conceivably, I mean, we're talking about a total of 3 employee housing units and another 4 guest cottages, so collectively 7 dwelling units, if you will, over the course of 173 acres, so well below the 1 per 10. The fact that they're clustered together, technically they wouldn't be allowed to do that in a conventional ag subdivision, but it just didn't make sense to make them 10 acres apart. And we also asked, again, so Brandon did clarify that the employee housing, which is is phased. I believe the first phase only includes maybe the one house, which is really like a tenant, just, protect or oversee the farm operation. And then as the business scales up, two more additional units. But the guest cottages, again, the way it's described, and we do have the client, of course, this is somewhat of a new or unique use to us, so we made sure that the actual operator is here to kind of answer operational questions, because we don't have anything like this in the county, at least not to this scale. But yeah, they would be used on a 1 or 2 week basis at a time, primarily for, again, entertaining clients or family of the Bhakta family was staying, say, for the holidays, but it's certainly not a living unit that would not be used, again, for rental or vacation purposes.
Chip, may I follow up on that question before you go on to your next one? When I first read over this, the first thing that came to mind was a California winery, where there would be tours, a gift shop, all sorts of things. That is not possible, correct? Just to toot my own horn, 2 weeks ago I was in Napa. So that's exactly the same thing I thought, because that's a very, very same concept. And again, the client can answer, the state law, I don't know if they allow distilling and a tasting room on site, much like they do in a beer brewery with a tap room. They may or may not, I'm not 100% on that. And as far as the gift shop, I mean, they do have a small office component. I don't think given the proximity to where they are to town, they're not planning on selling a bunch of T-shirts. But I'm sure if you do visit, there's probably a small counter. But it's not to the scale that you would expect to see in Napa or in wine country. The tours would be allowed.
They would be allowed, but I don't think the scale of what's being proposed is there yet. And again, I don't know. I don't know if Bill. Not to put you on the spot. I don't know if you can distill spirits and do a tasting room.
I don't know, but anything that would be on this site would have to be related to the activities that are taking place on the site. So could they open up a T-shirt shop? No, they couldn't. Anything that they try and market would have to be directly related to their distillery.
Would retail be allowed?
Very, very small amount of retail.
Yeah, like I said, maybe a counter display within the office would be the extent of what you would see.
Again, related to the activities on site.
Yeah, I'll yield back to Chip for your second questions.
The expansion of housing on this, would that be possible?
Not without, at minimum, revisiting the site plan. Again, we expect within reason that the number of residential units be at maximum held to the 1 per 10. But to answer your question, we would need to revisit the site plan and ultimately decide if we'd probably apply the same threshold that we apply to others, like a 10% rule, to having to go back through the process. I don't think that's their driving force, but we're aware of that concern.
Would that be done at the staff level?
Again, I referenced the 10% threshold. It's hard to get 10% of 7 units. It still doesn't yield a whole unit, but we potentially, if it could be done at the staff level, we would. If not, we would bring it back through the special exception process.
You good, Chip? Anyone else?
Would it be appropriate to ask how many employees we're talking about here?
You're welcome to. Again, my understanding of the operation is it's a scaled operation. So the short answer is it will scale over time, but I'd be happy to let the applicant describe some of their operational intents.
My questions might be outside the bounds of this approval, but there was a mention of the sugarcane farm, and wonder if that would have seasonal workers, for example.
Sure.
And
That's also something we asked about early on. Again, we're probably accused of being overly skeptical, but we're skeptical of everything that we're not 100% familiar with. So we asked those questions. And the short answer is it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario. They've grown test crops. They know they can grow cane, and it only takes a few months to grow. So they don't have 100 acres of cane ready to harvest because it would just go to waste. But there could be some some seasonal labor component to that, but I don't think it would be of a scale that would move the needle, so to speak.
I spent some time in Haiti as the guest of the only rum distiller in Haiti, and he told me that it's very unusual to make rum out of sugarcane. It's normally made out of molasses. He also told me you can't get a hangover from it, but I disproved that.
Good to know.
Todd, did you have a question?
No, I did not.
Are you good?
Yes.
Alan?
A couple questions. It's zoned A2. I think it's designated A2 as well.
AG2 is the land use, but yes.
And the agricultural industries may only be allowed there if they're directly related to active agricultural operations, so on and so forth. And the memo says that, well, agricultural industries shall include but not be limited to stockyards, feedlots, and packing houses.
Right.
And the rationale here in the memo to get from this operation to an agricultural industry is that components like sugar cane and fruit fields are being implemented into the project.
Correct.
I'm wondering where that concept ends. I mean, you pick up anything in a grocery store and you look at the ingredients, and you're going to find usually soybean oil or palm oil or stuff like that. And it seems that it leads to an expansion pretty far beyond things like stockyards, feedlots, and packing houses. So I guess I'd ask you, do you view this definition of industrial or agricultural industries as anything incorporating a component of an agricultural product?
No.
Do you view that we're expanding that definition?
No, I don't. And again, very early on, again, we're always kind of skeptical of, because you can do a distillery or a food and kindred products type operation in the industrial district. But for me, and again, this is knowing our code and how development works, but also just what I call the sniff test. This is a 900-acre farm, and 180 of which is being devoted to the distillery and production side of it. If someone came to us with a 20-acre ranch and said, "Hey, I'm going to grow a patch of soybeans, and then I'm going to create some other product that doesn't match the scale or sniff test, for lack of a technical term," but the whole farm to bottle, which is similar to the farm to table, movement that we've seen, and even more so in COVID, realizing how important it is to be able to grow food and products and produce things locally and not be dependent on everyone. That is how this particular project meets that criterion. But I don't foresee the next person coming in on a 10-fold smaller site and saying, "Hey, I have soybeans in my product, so I can now produce granola bars." It just doesn't. That's where we would. I don't think we're grossly increasing the allowance under this allowance.
Now, you say it's part of a 900-acre farm.
Correct.
But the other, whatever it is, 100 or 700 acres,
yes, sir,
aren't part of this application.
Not right now, no. And they can produce.
You can do anything over there within
agricultural, correct.
In the zoning requirements.
Correct.
So we could end up with just this parcel right here.
But even at 170 acres, that's still past the so-called sniff test. Again, we were approached by someone that wanted to do just that. They wanted to buy 10 acres of old citrus grove, and I think they wanted to do a brewery. And we just told them, hey, that just from a scalability perspective, that doesn't make sense. It was blatantly a tax dodge in that case.
Is there any ability to serve alcoholic beverages, including?
That's it. I don't know the answer. I know for beer and wine, you can ferment, produce, and then serve on site in a tap room. I think for some reason I want to say, and again, they may know, they may not know. I think the state does not allow spirits to be distilled and served on the same site, but I could be wrong. And if so, then a small tasting room can be a component inside the operation, but it's not particularly sizable, I can tell you that.
And that's regulated by state law?
Correct.
So if state law allows distilleries to serve on site, then this will serve on site.
If, maybe, if it does allow, correct. But I'm not 100% on that, but it'll have to follow the state requirements, and that's subject to change. I mean, the state legislature changes everything every year, so.
What prohibits this from eventually becoming a de facto bar?
The state requirements. They would, well, to be clear, a bar and lounge, so if they were to shut down the distillery and then just want to serve spirits out of a building out west, that's a different use entirely.
No, and I know that, but, you know, we're a distillery and we make this rum, and come on out here and drink some of our rum. We have a tiki bar, and we have our tiki area, we have the entertainment area, which it's called on these drawings, over at the pool. We have a little live music and drink our rum. What's to stop that?
I think at that point, that would no longer be an agricultural industry and would no longer meet the approvals that they are seeking now.
Right. This is under a special exception use.
Correct.
And as I understand it, on a special exception uses, as you read that provision of the code, it basically says it's for uses not ordinarily appropriate in an area, but will be allowed if they can be sufficiently protected, you know, compatible, et cetera.
Right.
Are things like this, you know, serving alcohol, I mean, we're in a land use situation. I realize the state has bar laws, but we're in a land use situation here. Is that the type of condition we should have on this? That, you know, if maybe no alcohol served on site, or, you know, some conditions on the special exception use that make sure if we don't, even if the state allows generally, you know, bars, I think in a land use situation, we can say, well, we don't want one there.
Phil Mattson, Community Development Director. Maybe getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, making this leap from, you know, raising a feedstock and distilling it to serving it and becoming, you know, the next Times Square or whatever. Can you get a beer at Audrey's Feed Stores Cafe? Can you get a wine at the Shack Farm to Table Diner? I mean, I think this is a growing area. It's a agritourism type thing. I don't think they're really proposing that. We're just reacting to what's being proposed here. So, and I would leave it at that.
Sorry. I just wanted to weigh in, Alan. One other item, the general criteria that you are very familiar with, that sort of the four pillars of the general criteria are the compatibility and, you know, health, general health and welfare type criteria. I mean, for us, again, compatibility, who are they incompatible with? The cows to the east and the oranges to the west, and then the size of the site, the separation. I mean, to us, that was essentially a no-brainer. The health, safety, and general welfare, again, from a strict read of the code, they're not any less safe or not based on what their proposal is.
Right.
And then we look to the specific criteria. And again, the specific criteria for agricultural industry are they're a little bit tough because they, you know, generally the rule of thumb is, hey, would this be better in a different in a different zoning district? And a strict read of that is, yes, they could distill an industrial district, which we just saw with the previous rezoning, is basically limited to the railroad tracks all the way into town. And then if you want to produce any, you know, again, the concept of farm to bottle or the production on site, there's two disparate issues or separate sites, and then you're running trucks in and out of State Road 60 just to complete the process.
The name escapes me, but I know there's a vineyard in Indian River County that they have their own grapes and make their own wine.
That's St. Lucie. It's the north end of St. Lucie County, Summercrush.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's the same concept.
And I would assume that's agricultural land.
Yes. Yes.
You done?
Yeah.
I'm going to follow up when you're done, when you are.
Well, yeah, let me switch a little bit.
Let me jump in.
Go ahead.
House Bill, or Bill 347 allows craft distillers, which this would be, can sell 2 bottles per year to each customer on site.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps you or not as far as anything else, but again, there's got to be the relationship between what is going on in the site and what is happening as far as your examples. So can you open up a bar on a site like this? My answer would be no, that it far exceeds what's going on. A bar is a commercial venture that has specific zoning areas, and that's not allowed in an agriculturally zoned area like this one.
And I will say, generally speaking, I have no problem with a rum distillery out there. I guess I'm skeptical of where what's tumbling
Where does
off
it go
this
next?
major site plan approval right now. And one was, are they serving alcohol or not? That area, the so-called guest cottages, pool house, and it's labeled generally as housing/entertainment area. I mean, my gut feeling is something called an entertainment area is not an area normally allowed, I would think, in this agriculture.
I think it's semantics. It's to entertain guests and clients is the way it's been described to us time and again. Again, using the Napa reference, it's also common for them to have a private on-site suite or inn. Sometimes it's like a bed and breakfast. Sometimes and then again, it's only for guests of the winery or the distillery. It's not. You can't just show up and say, "Hey, can I rent a room at the Sutter Home Inn?"
It appears to be for prospective clients, to entertain them, sell them on the whole idea of what they're doing there and the product.
Right.
Well, now we've extended industrial industries out another level.
It's an agricultural industry. That is the approval that they're seeking.
I understand on a special exception use, the burden is on the applicant. And I can't remember the compelling evidence, whatever that phrase is. Basically to prove the entitlement to the special exception use. Okay, I'll stop talking, but I know you wanted to follow up or something.
Well, we haven't heard from the applicant yet.
They are here.
Ask those questions to the applicant, but 2 things. There are 2 distilleries going into the city of Vero Beach as we speak, although it's not an ag operation because they're not producing their own ingredients. They're just distilling it. But I heard at a meeting this week, must have been yesterday, someone say, you can grow lemons, but you can't make lemonade. Is that the case, and is this going to be a precedent for that, or?
I'm
not sure.
that-
I mean, we
that-
had juice. We had a juice plant.
Right. So we do have several juice plants, Minute Maid and the like, that are actually in industrial districts that happen to be out west, sort of surrounded by agriculture. So the short answer to that is, we haven't had anybody approach us. Different sort of segues. You can grow lemons and pack lemons, but again, it has to be at a scale where the primary use or function is the production, and then you can package them. But to process or produce juice, I think if someone wanted to approach us and say, hey, we have 1,000, 2,000 acres under cultivation that we want to do believe it or not, craft orange juice production, they could approach us with a similar request. But again, it would be a special exception, and it would need to meet the same criteria that it's justified by the scope and the scale of what they're doing. But to just outright get oranges from all the surrounding groves and juice them and do a juice plant, that has to be in industrial right now.
Okay, I'd like to hear
Sure.
from the applicant.
Let's end this then and open the public hearing. We good? Okay, public hearing is open. Name, address, phone number.
My name's Leo Gibson. I've been sworn. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've spent a fair amount of time down in Indian River County over the last 4 or 5 years. I've been working with Mr. Bhakta, Peter Bhakta, going on close to a decade now. I'm a lawyer by training, but I also play a big role in the operations of his business ventures, whether it's the real estate development component or the distilled spirits. We've got a lot of irons in the fire right now. Don't want to bore you with too many of the details, but I spend a fair amount of time in Vermont, where we currently do have a farm-based distillery, which was approved by the town of Shoreham, so these issues are not new to us. We've heard a lot of these questions before, and we understand some of the skepticism as well, because it doesn't necessarily intuitively make sense to people that a distillery is something that ties to a farm. But when you think about a little bit about history and a little bit about the nature of the product, distilled spirits is nothing more than a processed food crop. If you think of a whiskey, it's distilled beer. To make a beer, you've got to grow grain. When you think of a brandy, it's distilled fruit juice. Mostly it's grapes. You crush grapes, you make a wine, you distill it. Historically, distillation has been the way that farmers made their product shelf stable. At one point, where we have our other operations in the north in Vermont, there were something like 18 operating distilleries just in the tiny town of Poultney, where we purchased the campus of Green Mountain College, where we're going to be basing the world's first distilled spirits brand. That's our brandy up north, that's based on a college campus. But in any event, yeah, in Vermont, just to tie back to the point, the zoning there was low-density residential, which was similar in terms of intensity of use as what it did allow as a conditional use light industry. And so that's kind of the route that we took up in Vermont. I don't think this agricultural industry is that much dissimilar. In terms of what we did in Vermont, and, it sort of ties back to the initial question that Commissioner Landers asked about why do you need the housing. And, I think the staff did a good job of explaining why you need it. Because a key part of our business in the 3-tiered beverage alcohol distribution system, we sit at the supplier tier. Most of your sales are done to wholesalers, which are nameless, faceless kind of logistics companies, but they also have a sales staff that go into retail accounts, which is the 3rd tier. After the distributors, the 2nd tier. Your retail accounts are both your on-premise suppliers, where the consumption takes place on-premise in the restaurants and bars, and off-premise, where it goes generally into liquor stores. And so housing is necessary, because if you want to tell your story, if you want to engage with your consumers, if you want to engage with the folks at the wholesalers, their sales reps, who are going to be the ones who are pushing your product at the accounts, if you want to win fans among the beverage purchasers, the bar managers, the restaurant owners, you got to show them what you're doing. And they want to see it, they want to smell it, they want to taste it, they want to know where their food is from. And that holds true for consumers in this day and age as well. And so one of the things that we managed to do up in Vermont, and we were one of the first distilleries, at least in the United States, to do this. A number of the distilleries in Scotland had done it, and now a lot of this is coming online in Kentucky and in the other states where a lot of distillation is done. A lot of that distillation, by the way, again, takes place on farms. A lot of those visits take place on farms. A lot of those stays, that entertainment component is done on farms, because people want to see where the grain is grown. They want to see where in this case the sugarcane is grown. You give them a chance. A lot of these folks, they're bartenders, they're restaurant owners. A lot of them have never been out of the big cities. And the big cities are where you sell most of your product. But first time I took a drive out State Road 60 and drove up into the middle of the Whiteface Ranch, the 900 acres where we're looking to base this operation, my jaw hit the floor. And the first time I took my 5-year-old son out there, he looked around and he said, "Dad, are we in Africa?" Because it looked like it was, the savannah. And that's the magic that we want to preserve. We're not looking to put in some giant industrial still that's pumping out, tens of thousands of barrels a day. This isn't going to be, some giant distillery in Louisville, Kentucky. This is farm-based distillation, and a number of states have passed farm-based distillery laws to permit and to allow some leeway for distilleries expressly. There are ways you can get it done within the confines of existing planning and zoning regulations, but a lot of states are looking to actively encourage this type of enterprise because they realize from an agritourism standpoint, from a business development standpoint, from a hospitality standpoint, people are looking for things like this. And, we're going to have a tasting room. And the folks, when they come, they're probably going to sit outside and look at the stars and listen to a little bit of music, surrounded by 900 acres and cows and orange groves and swamps and gators to the north. But it's going to be done at a low scale. We're playing at an ultra-high price point. The product that we have in market right now, the Bhakta brandy, sells at an MSRP of $400 a bottle. The whiskey that we launched back in the Whistle Pig days, the lowest priced SKU is, or at least was at the time, $70 a bottle, with the prices stretching up all the way to $600-700 a bottle for the cask strength stuff. There aren't going to be college kids out there doing keg stands, and nobody's going to be driving out from the island to get bombed in the middle of nowhere to at our tasting room. The sales, the only product that we are allowed to sell, and we are allowed to sell under existing Florida law, it was recently changed, so I understand some of the confusion. There was a big push by some of these craft distillers who felt that they were at a competitive disadvantage to the distillers in other states where it was permitted for the distillers to sell their product and serve a cocktail or a tasting so that people could get familiar. And so Florida recently changed those laws. To the second point, how many people show up at the distillery or tasting room? Let me give you a little practical example, because I can tell you from experience. At Whistle Pig, we had a farm, quiet rural area, Quiet Valley Road, 470 acres, surrounded by other dairy farms. Not really open to the public, very limited tours available there. We might have seen 50 or 60 people a week. We didn't want to throw the doors open to the public. That's not what we're selling. That's not the DNA of our brand. Similarly, within the last year or so, we've sort of kicked off the hospitality program for our new brand, the Bhakta brandy, up in Vermont. What we do is we bring some folks up for a weekend. Usually they're groups of about 12. Usually they're ultra high net worth individuals who have bought what's called our stockholder program, where folks pay $30,000 for 76 bottles, 2 bottles from each of the first 38 barrels that we're launching. So these are people who appreciate fine spirits. They're not looking to get into trouble. Once we get them on our campus, we do all the driving because we've got some liability there as well. And, we give them a chance to, we've probably had 5-6 of these groups, 50 or 60 people come through in the last 6 months. So in terms of intensity of use, this is not going to be, on the one hand, from a retail standpoint, an ABC, and then from an off-premise standpoint. And from an on-premise standpoint, this isn't going to be, pick your bar at the island. I don't tend to go out much. I'm too old for that anymore. So that's sort of the vision. It's to preserve the farm. It's catering to a relatively well-heeled, exclusive clientele, and it's going to be done at a relatively small scale, light touch, very personal in terms of the interaction between our staff, and that's why we do have some requirements for staff housing. We need people there, one, as caretakers of the general property, but two, also to make sure that this hospitality program is done in such a way that these people walk away feeling like they've been treated right, because they're generally spending a lot of money or investing a lot of money on behalf of their businesses and, acquiring and promoting our product. In terms of expansion of the residential, we don't really anticipate this at this point. I mean, I think again of Whistle Pig. We started off with a 5-bedroom guest house that served us well for the first 10 years. Eventually, they got busy enough within the last few years that they acquired a second 4-bedroom house down the road. But again, it's not a 500, 600 room Hilton, and it's not and it's not a 500 unit residential development that's gone in, that's open to the public. These are people who are hand invited. Typically, they're not paying. This is something that we provide, as part of our sales and marketing budget, frankly. What else? How many employees? Relatively, lightly staffed. It doesn't require a lot of people to run the sort of business that we're running. Now, in terms of harvesting the cane, that's a different deal. We have 3 or 4 Jamaican migrant laborers who come up to the farm in Vermont in the fall to help us. We've got a 500-acre orchard on Lake Champlain. We've got a 700-acre farm in Shoreham. We've got some vines planted. We've got the apple trees planted. And those guys help us bring in our crops in the fall. But and we anticipate that once we get the cane going and once we get it growing, we, probably not going to be out there doing it ourselves. So I assume we're going to have to find someone. I know that there are laborers who understand this stuff. Just maybe 45 minutes south of us. You don't have to go too far down toward Indiantown until you hit the cane fields. But then again, look, we're not looking to become the Faneuils of Indian River County here either. This is not going to be some, intensive /burn operation where, there's truckloads of workers all over the place and it looks like something out of Mad Max after the fields have been burned out. This is going to be relatively small scale, enough to meet our needs for production, and again, enough so that when our guests come to the farm, they can say, yeah, there's the cane that's being made into this outstanding world-class rum. What else? Oh, interesting point on the cane versus the molasses versus sugar cane. Yeah, the rum agricole method, it does make the best rums. I'm not sure it's hangover free, but that's the method that we're trying to explore because it tends to make a rum that's less sweet. Once you char something like you do with when you're producing molasses, it caramelizes and becomes sweeter. And we like to build brands and create products that sort of cross over to the whiskey drinker who generally likes a product that's a little bit drier. And that French production method where you use fresh pressed cane juice to ferment and then distill, the rum agricole method, they call it, that's the way to go. Those are the best rums in the world. Yeah, so I mean, to me, again, I do understand. I don't mean to meander. I'm very excited about the brand. I'm excited about the project. I think you guys, provided that you're kind enough to approve the proposal, this is going to be a showpiece. It'll be unlike anything else in Florida. It's going to be, I think, a crown jewel in the farm distillery movement because nobody is really doing an American rum. We're seeing a lot of farm-based whiskey distilleries. This maybe not the first of its kind. I read about one other in Georgia, but we'll be number 2, but we'll be the best. And so happy to answer any other questions. Like I said, we've done this before. We've done it before on farms. Once they're up and running, I think people get over a lot of the skepticism. Maybe if you get a chance, come up and see us in Vermont. Come check out the farm on Quiet Valley Road where Whistle Pig operates. Come check out the farms where we're now operating Bhakta Brandy, where we repurposed a barn that was built back in 1789 by the original settlers in New England. And, we always try to tie it back to the distilling history because that was, back in the colonial days, how farmers managed to make their product shelf stable to get it to market. And, we're looking to bring that back and to localize production, keep it extremely high quality and let people know where their food is made and how it's made. And that's the job that we've set for ourselves, and we look forward to working with you to make it reality. So thank you. And any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Can we take a virtual tour of your Vermont farms?
There may be that sort of thing on the website. I'd have to
connect and let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. I can get you his information for sure.
Yeah.
After you make your decision, of course.
I'm not settling for virtual.
Any questions?
What's the existing use of this property?
We have a few hundred head of cattle there. It was historic. Well, the history of it's incredible. The farm was originally settled by the grandfather of a gentleman by the name of Lex Krumholt, who's been around Indian River County, Vero Beach for a very long time. His family, they were flour merchants from the Netherlands, and his grandfather was over here on this side of the ocean doing business in the States when war broke out and the U-boats started prowling around the Atlantic. So he set up a flour farm here in Indian River County. He built sort of a one-of-a-kind, sort of Dutch-modeled system with dikes and berms to manage the water on this particular farm, and they grew flowers for a while. Eventually, that business kind of got crowded out by the Colombians, and they started, building up some of the land and went into groves, citrus for a while, and then, all the issues with citrus, both from international competition and then the blight, they migrated to cattle. And so the Krumhold family had owned the farm for, I think, 3 generations. Lex still has a place on the southwest corner of the farm. And then there was a gentleman by the name of Fernandez from down in Miami who bought it, owned it for 4 or 5 years, tried to have a go as a cattle rancher, didn't really find it was working. And then Raj, after he sold Whistle Pig a few years back, he had been living over on the island, but he always liked farms. And, that's in our DNA from the earliest days of Whistle Pig. The whole idea behind Whistle Pig was a farm-based rye whiskey distillery. And so, when he saw this opportunity to do something out west, sort of away from the city, away from the hustle and bustle, and to do a farm-based distillery, well, we jumped on it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just one last question. Does the distilling process put out any odors, any significant odors?
No, if you walk past a distillery that's in operation, you will smell something, but most of it's from the fermentation of the grain. And I would say, and I was just down at a massive, and to be honest with you, I was at a massive distillery in the Dominican Republic about a month ago, and you could hardly smell a thing. I think, maybe their fermenters were just on a bigger scale, and, that was like huge. The fermenters were like 50 feet high, so maybe it was just the odor of the fermentation was up above us. But when you were walking around there, you smelled nothing. When you walk through a whiskey distillery, you will smell, it's like baking bread, basically, and it doesn't go very far. I doubt, you get to the boundaries of the 900-acre farm, you're going to be able to smell much outside of the immediate vicinity of the distillery.
My drink of choice is rum, however, not $400 bottles.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much.
Any other public statements? Name, address?
I'm Alexander Cromhout. I was not sworn in, but I swear to tell the truth. I am not opposed to what's being proposed here. However, I think there are some things that you all have brought up that are legitimate concerns, and I share those with you. One is it's going to be done in phases. You got the crop growing especially. And Leo, you propose a phase 1 for your sugar cane and then a phase 2 for sugar cane. Sugar cane is a crop that can freeze. Indian River County has a history with that. My question would be, what happens with a special exception like this if the crops are not profitable or cannot be grown adequately to provide for the needs of the distillery? That's a concern that I have, and that may be something that you want to consider tying to the special exception. There are other crop alternatives that can be grown also for distillery, and I think there's been some discussion on that are possible. You had the same issues and the same concerns, disease, freezes, and things of this nature that you need to address. Believe me, the history of my family's experiences on this property, we had to deal with all of that, and that's why we went through the transitions. You brought up the question of odors. I don't know if there is an odor problem or not, but I'm sure you could set up some sort of a constraint related to that. If it becomes a problem, it needs to be dealt with. The guest houses and their proximity to where I am located, I'm a quarter of a mile to the west of this property. And the activities that they will present, there will be parties and things of that nature. I purposely cut out from the family farm, which was at the time 1,300 acres, 94 acres for myself and my wife. We did this because we enjoy not having neighbors around. And unlike the presentations before, we don't want to live on a 70-foot lot. We want to live in open space. And we thoroughly enjoy the privacy. The sunsets are absolutely phenomenal there, as are the sunrises. And he's got a valid point. That's something that is worth preserving and trying to deal with. And from my perspective, that's a concern that I have. I don't want to hear party after party and having these issues. It is an agricultural area, after all. My intentions in the long run, if I can't afford to continue to own 94 acres, is to set up an ag PUD there. I originally came to this same board back in 2005 to set up an aerodrome and an equestrian ag PUD on the entire property. But at the time, the county's mandate was cluster it. Well, you're never going to get an equestrian community when you got everything crammed into 1/4 section. And that's what they wanted me to do. So that fell by the wayside. My point is that we're in an agricultural area. When I proposed to build a house, and I built a house there, I had to sign an agreement. And that agreement was, I accept the surrounding agricultural ventures, whatever they may be, to exist. And I, as an individual landowner who wants to have a residence there, and by the way, this is the only residence that's on the north side of Route 60 past Indian River Farms drainage district. It's outside of any drainage district, as this property is also. We have to maintain our own drainage, be able to stay dry, even though our property is higher than right here. Bottom line is, one of the things that concerns me is we're proposing a residence for the manager, and we're proposing some cottages. How are you treating those cottages? Are you treating them as single-family units? And if you are, great. Now the question comes in, what are you going to do with the 1 to 10 zoning on the property, and you got another 10 units of potential there coming too? That concerns me. I don't want to see a bunch of houses around. I accept the 1 to 10. Are you going to transfer the additional 10 units to the other property that's adjoining this and part of it? That's something you need to consider. And are you going to allow that with a special exception condition on this property? Those are all things that you need to address and seriously think about how you're going to handle it. And for the rest, I just want you to know my feelings. I enjoy my privacy. I don't want to have, with my sea breeze and my land breeze, the odor of a distillery, if it produces an odor, which hopefully it won't. And for the rest, I don't want parties going on and people jumping onto Route 60 after being served. Because if you haven't traveled Route 60 west lately, it's very unusual that you can go under 80 miles an hour, because the traffic there is traveling between 80 and 100 miles an hour on these exits. That's fast. And there's not an adequate amount of patrolling going on to keep that speed limit down to the permitted 65 mile an hour speed limit. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I wanted to share them with you so to help address your questions. If you have any questions of me, I'll be more than glad to answer them. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
You said you were the only neighbor on the north side of 60. Are there others on across the street?
I'm hard of hearing, so if you would.
I'm sorry, you said you were the only neighbor on the north side of 60. Are there any other neighbors within a mile or two? Or?
The only activity that's taken place is an individual's, a vegetable farmer has purchased 1,000 acres in the Delta Farms Drainage District next to me. And I do have a new neighbor now. He had built a large packing house for that operation, and he's got a employee residence on it next to his shop. It's a small one, but it works.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone else like to speak? Up to the podium. Name and address.
Hi, my name is Melinda Kromhout, and I'm the neighbors right directly west. And from my barn apartment kitchen window, I'm able to see where this proposed site is going to be. And just like my husband, I'm curious to know about the odor that might be emitted, and also the height that the facility would be.
Ryan, you want to field that?
Sure. So of course, as is typical of the entire county, the 35 height limitation applies. From the conceptual drawings that I recall, the office component has sort of a silo architectural feature that I believe is 25 feet, but everything else is around that same 20 to 25 feet height limit. And the residential, I can't imagine would be the just typical single-story residential height.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we've addressed the odor as best we can.
I really don't know what it smells like, you know?
Yeah, apparently it smells like nothing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just don't see us being able to define that any better.
Right. And also, if the cottages, are they going to be classified as a single home resident, or is a cottage something different? Because as far as I understand it, a single home resident each one can hold, what, 6 people?
Our code doesn't have a definition of a cottage. It'd be permitted as a single-family residence, subject to all of the Florida building code requirements.
Right, that's what I was thinking. So each one can hold 6 people in it.
Well,
at maximum, yes. Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
well, give or take, but yes, it'll be treated from a building permitting side. It'll be each unit will be designed and built to meet the Florida Building Code as a residential unit.
Yes, sir.
Well, how strict are we with the single-family part of it? I remember in the city, an attorney got up and argued that in the single-family zoning, that this woman should be able to run a rooming house. And my reaction to him was, what part of single-family residential don't you understand?
No,
this is not that.
A single-family residence is limited to just that, a single family. When you start to throw in, 8 bedrooms and 3 kitchens and things like that, it ceases to become a single-family residence and then gets closer to be a hotel or a rooming house.
Right. But
The zoning is completely different here, and a rooming house would not even remotely be allowed by any stretch of the imagination without a rezoning.
But if they have these buildings, cottages, single-family residences, whatever you want to call them, will, the client and his girlfriend be able to qualify, or a client and his business partner? They're not part of one family. That's what I was kind of getting at.
That's correct.
So they would be allowed, or they would not?
From what I understand, this is going to be for a person that's interested in buying this product, distributing this product, to come and taste it and be able to see everything. So is it going to be a single family coming in on a vacation rental type thing? No, it's going to be a business type of transaction that's going to be occurring. I guess I just can't foresee a group of businessmen getting together and having a kegger at a place with bottles of rum going at $400 a pop. That's not what it's set up for, and it's not what it's allowed.
And they're not going to come there to live.
No.
It's more of an ancillary structure to the operation.
So the 6+1 rule does not apply.
We have no requirements in our code of how many people can live in a single-family house. They have to be related by blood. So if you have a big farm family that has 8 kids, God bless you.
Right.
Anyone else? Are you done?
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, all. My name is Melissa St. Anne Mittag. I live here in Vero Beach, Florida. And I have one easy question. How many square feet will the distillery building be, please?
Which should be an easy question. I don't think we have a breakdown of the square footage. Give me a second.
And should there be a one-time restriction on the square footage of the distillery?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second part of the question. What was the second part?
Should there be a restriction, a one-time restriction on the square footage of the distillery building?
Okay, so it's sort of a two-part of the same question. The distillery building itself is 5,625 square feet, 5,600 square feet. Actually, the bigger, it's funny not to have the cursor, the larger structures are the barrel storage, which obviously they take up more room, but they're a very passive type use. Again, if you're familiar with the distilling and aging, I mean, some of these are 2, 3, 4, 8, 10, 12-year aged spirits. But to answer your question, and probably to alleviate a number of your questions, is this site plan is controlling. So in order to expand the distillery by more than 10%, or the barrel storage by more than 10%, or any of those components, they would have to go back through the entire process, including the public hearing process. So to answer your question, it's 5625 plus at most at a staff level 10%, which is another only 562 square feet. Anything beyond that, we have to go back through the process.
I happen to have visited the distilleries in Central America, La Flor de Caña. Quite impressive. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we'll close the public hearing. Sure, we have comments to be made.
I think, let me start here. The project that you described, the operation you described, I think is wonderful. I have no problem with that. The concern that I have is that this project basically be that there be conditions that make sure that what you've described to us is the operation. That, for example, the cottages will be used as an ancillary to the business, not just some type of open whatever. Number two, that there won't be like public parties there or anything major alcohol stuff. You bring clients in, that's great. I know things might get out of hand a little bit, that's okay. But just, some type of, alcohol-based activity out there on a large enough scale to become perhaps disruptive. And number three, the odors. I understand what you said, there are no noxious odors. These people live a quarter mile in the direction of the prevailing wind, east to west. Something that, if it turns out there's a noxious odor that's legitimately troublesome, they can come back to the county and say, hey, do something in that manufacturing process to cut that odor back. I think with a few conditions like that, so that the operation does operate as you explained, I think it'd be a wonderful addition to this county. That's my comment.
You go ahead.
My comment to that would be, number one, your first concern is covered by code enforcement. If they get too out of hand or it's not according to the site plan, we go ahead and cite them and make them either stop or fine them $100 a day. Same thing with your noise complaints. If they're not using it as directed and guided by the site plan, which has the effect of our adopted code, again, Code enforcement goes after them and forces them to cease and desist. As far as the noxious odors, it's a 75 by 75 foot building. That's the size of the distillery that's involved here. I'm trying to think of another business that would be 75 feet and by 75 feet that could produce an aroma or an odor that could be heard or smelled that far away, aside from a dairy barn. I can't think of anything else.
Well, I still think from a land use regulation, land use control situation, this is a special exception, something not ordinarily allowed or appropriate in an area like this. To put restrictions in like that would be appropriate. I think these people, for example, living nearby who came to an agricultural district to basically live an agricultural type life would feel better with conditions in place saying that. And the very special exception use ordinance talks directly to that point, provided conditions are in place to make sure that it is not something that's disruptive outside the limits of the property. So, that's my opinion.
Dr. Day, Alan, and to dovetail off of Bill's points there, so operational characteristics can be somewhat tough. So we do have noise and odor requirements already built in, and the agricultural district does have obviously a lower noise threshold. It's the only thing lower than that is the conservation districts, but we do have a relatively low noise thresholds, and again, that's typically, it drops down further after 10 a.m. and before 6 or 7 a.m. I can't remember the exact hours, but those are our existing sort of general rules of thumb. Like I said, the site plan control, so we are only talking about a total of 7 units, three housing units and 4 guest units. So the number is already set at 7. If it makes you feel better to say that it shall only be 7, that's fine. That's kind of a moot condition, but we can do that if need be.
It's not the number.
Okay.
It's the use.
Right.
I mean, this is an agricultural industry. As long as those properties, those cottages are used in connection with the industry, I mean, that's the premise on which they're existing right now.
The last thing I'd say is I don't want to get into a negotiation on the floor here on conditions. If there are some general conditions you want to recommend, you're welcome to. We will probably meet with the applicant to make sure there are no deal killers, and then ultimately we'll forward our recommendation. Of course, exactly how you recommend, and then if there's any additional input to the board to make the final decision. But if the only thing I can really think of controlling for is the number of either open to the public and I don't want to bar or limit certain special events. And maybe there's a certain number per year that could be limited. But I also don't want two clients that happen to have 3 kids in town be construed to be a special event or a public event. So it's tough, but I think I understand what you're saying, Alan. I agree. There are operational conditions or certain conditions that you can impose. I don't want to pick a number and then their business model says no, it's twice that or half that. That's my only concern.
I like the way Alan described it. It all sounded great, but is there a way to hold them to the way they described it? In other words, would that be a special condition?
It goes back to code enforcement.
Right, yeah. Again, the site plan is set. They're not getting any additional units. They're not getting any additional buildings. They're not getting any larger buildings. They're not getting any additional uses. They can't also all of a sudden become a bar or an apparel store. They can't also start deciding that they want to, be anything outside. I don't want to,
rent the
cycle here.
Out. They can't.
Correct. Yeah, they're limited to what they're being approved for, and what they're being approved for is by and large prescribed by the plan, if that makes sense. The operational characteristics, again, are, to me, controlled in other parts of the existing code. But that's the best I can offer under our recommendations and our, in our, what we're bound by in the code.
Any additional comments?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Could I make one more comment? I will say this, since we've had our distillery up and running in Shoreham at Whistle Pig, and since we've had our distillery, the Bhakta distillery up and running just down the road, we haven't had a single code enforcement action brought against either place, and we haven't had a single neighbor complain about our operations to the authorities at either place. That's not to say that once in a while maybe somebody didn't get loud, but we picked up the phone, we dealt with the situation, and it never reached at either place a higher level, and I think we'd find the same thing would happen here.
Chip?
Regarding the employee housing, how many employees are we talking?
That's good. I defer back to the client.
I would anticipate that it'll scale based on the success of the business. Again, right now we've got probably 2 or 3 employees that are based with respect to the Vermont operation who handle sort of like the hospitality and the on-campus retail function. We've converted the library of Green Mountain College into a retail store, library of the world's old great spirits, a couple of employees on that end. From a production, there's a few folks who do groundskeeping and maintenance of the structures and the like. And then you've got a couple of people that you need to run the fermenters and the stills. And then there's some back office too. You've got your bookkeeper, your accountant, your CFO. I think a lot of that work for this business will probably at least initially be done up in Vermont, where the main headquarters of the business is actually kind of shifted to, even though the original plan was to have it down here, but the life changes, the world changes. But in any event, it's not a very at least initially labor-intensive operation when you're talking about a relatively small-scale craft distillery with a little bit of a hospitality program tied into it.
On-site housing is nothing new. I mean, the good example I can give you of on-site housing is the trotting facility out on Kings Highway, 66th and 53rd, where they have on-site housing for the folks that look after the horses.
One other example is the Rollins Ranch has a number of units that are clustered together. Again, with the understanding that I believe Rollins might be A3, so they might be at 1 per 20, but it doesn't make sense to physically separate them at a 20-unit clip. So I think they have somewhere between a half and a dozen units out there for ranch hands, but also some researchers out there as well. So you're right, it's not uncommon. And when we were talking about Rollins is 10,000 acres, or if not more. 10 units is not something that's out of the norm.
I don't think employee housing is anything unusual.
Correct.
And I think we're going to have more and more of that. But the concept of guest cottages, pool, the entertainment area, that's the area that I'm concerned about.
Understood.
Yeah, and I was initially skeptical, but I think all my fears have been answered, and I have no concerns about that. I think that the guest housing is going to be people that are dropping $40, $50, $60,000. So I don't see that as a problem.
I don't see it as a problem as long as as that's what the activity is, which sounds great. But, if it goes beyond there, where does it go? And that's
Code enforcement.
Right. Exactly.
Code enforcement.
Are there any other examples of this kind of client entertainment facility for businesses in the county?
Formally, no. I can assure you there's plenty of client entertaining going on the island at all times. No, this is, in fact, as the applicant said, this would only be the second craft distillery in the entire state of Florida.
Well, I'm not talking about specific to this industry, just in general, on-site things of this type?
Again,
I can't think of it.
you're right. Speaking generally, I
I
mean,
mean, it's bad.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of the golf courses have the ability for folks to stay on site. And I'm sure, again, the trotting facility, equestrian facilities, I know the polo grounds at Point West, they have staff housing. So, you know, apples to apples, no, but there are similar type concepts, yes.
Quail Valley has basically a motel and on their A1A facility.
Right. And they have units above their river landside clubhouse. I mean, again, that's right, same idea, same concept.
Right, guest housing, yeah.
Yeah.
Regarding the cane, the sugar cane is being grown, I don't want to assume anything, in this location or outside this, I mean, where's it being grown? And the reason I'm asking for that is then potentially the burning that would occur.
So again, the way it was explained is that they have grown test crops and are confident that they can yield enough, if not more, than they need to harvest in order to produce what they want to produce on site. I don't think it's at a scale that requires burning. That slash and burn is a much larger production type scale. But I can again ask I don't know, Bill, if it's okay that they still answer questions at this point, but.
I mean, I think the poor horse is kind of suffering a little bit here. You know, I'm thinking that we're probably coming to full circle. It's an agricultural type thing. There's burning in the citrus industry when you push a bunch of dead citrus trees in a pile and burn them. So there's burning in other agricultural, silviculture, forestry type operations where you're doing a control burn. The county does its own control burning to maintain scrub jay habitat. So, you know, this is a little different, but certainly not out of the ordinary.
For several of the reasons you just outlined, I think we also can't really put any kind of limitation on the odor that might come from agricultural processing on agricultural land.
There's far worse odors.
Yeah,
if
you're in that zone, one could complain about the smell from the packing houses or cattle's or anything. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think we're starting to run in circles here. So, if no one objects, call for a motion.
Motion to approve with staff conditions?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay. And nay only from the standpoint of the conditions. Again, I like the idea a lot.
Motion passes. Commissioner matters?
That's up to. No, you guys are the commissioners. I don't.
Nothing.
Planning matters?
Mr. Chair, I don't anticipate, it's not 100% ruled out, but I don't anticipate having the first meeting in May. But I do believe we'll be advertising for another public hearing in the second meeting of May. And we'll be sure to update you on the board's ruling on this matter at whatever meeting after they rule.
Attorney matters?
None, sir.
Adjourned.
This is a meeting.
Nine thirty.
we might not have.